Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm James and this is E3D. So today we're going to be taking a look at the E3D V6 HotEnd. We're going to talk about what components go into assembling the HotEnd, how we actually assemble it, and then finally how we hot tighten the HotEnd ready to use. So let's do it. Okay, so before we talk about the components that go into the HotEnd and how to assemble it, let's first of all unpackage an E3D V6 kit that you would get direct from them and have a look at what components go into it. So this is how it comes to you, basically all in one bag, ready to go. So let's have a look what's inside. So I'll get all the components out first and then we can go through what each part is. Okay, so first of all we have a look at the heater cartridge. So to make identification a little bit easier, E3D have coloured the heater cartridge. So this yellow one is 24 volt and the blue ones are 12 volt, and then there's also another one which we'll speak about in a second. So this is a 24 volt 30 watt heater cartridge. The next thing we've got is the thermistor itself. So this is the cartridge style thermistor, and then you get an extension cable for that as well. The next thing we've got is the heatsink fan clip, and then the 30mm fan that would attach to that. We have the E3D sock. So there's two versions of the sock, the Pro and then this version. So this just basically helps with keeping molten plastic off the block and the nozzle. And then you get one cable tie and a small piece of PTFE tubing. So if you was to buy the Bowden kit, you would actually get a longer length of PTFE tubing in the kit with it. So then we have this other separate bag as well. So this has the components in that we would call the hot side and the cold side. So if we have a look at the hot side first, so the hot side basically refers to the parts that get hot. So we have the heater block. This is just an aluminium heater block, an aluminium heater brake or heat brake, and then the brass nozzle. And then also in this bag we have some heatsink compound which we apply to the heat brake when we screw it into the heat sink, and then a PTFE coupler, and then a clip which will just make sure that PTFE doesn't come out. So that's the hot side, and then the cold side would effectively be this heatsink and then obviously the fan. And then the last piece you get in the kit is the universal fixing kit. So in the universal fixing kit we basically have two Allen keys, two screws which you only need one of to attach the heater cartridge to the heater block, two set screws again which you only need one of to retain the thermistor in the heater block, and then the 4 screws to attach the fan to the fan clip. So yeah, that's all the components you get in a V6 kit. So let's have a look at the components in detail and then the different versions of those components you can also get. Okay, so now we've seen all the components that come in the kit, let's talk about them individually and what options you've got to have an upgrade for that particular part. So if we start at the heatsink, we'll start at the top of the HotEnd and move our way down. So there's a couple of options for heatsinks. They are all pretty much the same in terms of the size and what the heatsink does. You only have a couple of options for mounting. So this is what we call a groove mount heatsink. You can then also buy a threaded blue heatsink, and that basically just has a thread at the top rather than the groove, and that's probably more found in Delta style printers, where you can actually put the end of the heatsink through the effector and then clamp it down with a nut. So the only other option you have for heatsink is the E3D Gold heatsink, and as far as I'm aware, other than it just being bling, there is no difference between this and the gold one. So the next thing we've got is the heat break. So this is just a standard heat break. And the only other option you've got for heat breaks is a titanium heat break, and that's just, as far as I'm aware, a little bit stronger, and I'm not sure if that changes any of the thermal properties or not, but so they're the two options for heat break. Now the heat block, we've got three options. So this is the standard aluminium heat block. It comes with every kit. The options you have are to have a copper heat block, this standard aluminium heat block, and then you can also buy a steel heat block. So each one of those is going to have different thermal properties, and how it affects the filament flow and stuff like that. So yeah, heat block, you have three options. Now the nozzle, there's so many different options. This is just a standard brass nozzle, but you can get the nozzle X, which is has a special coating which basically kind of acts as a sock, but it is part of the actual nozzle, and it also will allow for use of some abrasive filaments and stuff like that. The other options you've got is a copper nozzle, a stainless steel nozzle, and then a hardened steel nozzle. So hardened steel nozzle would be perfect for stuff like carbon fibre filaments, stuff like that. So yeah, you've got like 5 different options for nozzles. You've also got a bit of choice in heater cartridge. So again, if you're using a 24 volt system, you need a 24 volt heater, but you can also get a precision heater. So that basically will just have a little bit more accuracy in its temperature regulation, so it will get to temperature a lot smoother, I believe. The next option we have is for the thermistor. So as well as the thermistor, the standard thermistor coming in what I call a clamping style and a cartridge style, so this is the cartridge style. You can also get a PT100 and a PT1000 thermistor, and so the PT100s basically are a thermocouple, and they require extra hardware, but they allow you to measure higher temperatures. So if you're going to be printing stuff like peak or ultim, you'll need higher temperature in your hot end, so you're going to need to be able to measure that temperature as well. And then the only other things we've got some options over are the nozzle sock, or the block sock. So you can get a pro version, which basically doesn't have this big hole where the nozzle is. It's just a tiny hole for the tip of the nozzle to come through, and that's again purely to stop plastic sort of collecting around the nozzle. In terms of fans, you can also get a clear fan, but again it doesn't do anything other than just being a clear fan. So yeah, they're the different options for the components in the hot end. So I'll now show you how to assemble a standard V6 hot end. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to actually assemble the hot end. So I've done a couple of things before starting filming just to make it quicker. So I've just installed the Bowden clip, the retaining clip and the coupler. I've pre-installed the screws into the heater block, and I've attached the fan to the fan clip. So the first thing to do is make sure you get the orientation of the block the right way around. So I'm just going to zoom in so you can see that a little bit easier. So on the bottom is the screw for the heater cartridge and also for the thermistor. So those have to be on the bottom of the block. You then take your nozzle and what I do is I screw it in all the way, and then you'll find that you have sort of one face that lines up straight. Now the recommendation is to do one full turn out. It used to be a quarter of a turn, so I'm going to go in the middle and do half a turn. So you just back that nozzle out half a turn like that, and then what we do from the other side is we screw in our heat brake. So this, the shorter end of the heat brake, let me see if I can get that so you can see it. That screws into the back, so it basically is going to sit up against the nozzle. So we want to stop this from turning if we can, and then just, so we're not trying to tighten anything up at the moment. We're just trying to, basically this is what's known as a cold assembly. So we've just done that. And the next thing to do is to take your heatsink compound that you got and then just put a tiny amount onto the actual threads of the heatsink, of the heat brake, sorry. So you don't need a lot. If you just put that on there like that, so you can see I've put a little bit on. Then we take our heatsink, and if we thread that on, the actual act of threading it on will distribute the compound. So we'll thread that on once, and then if we undo it, you can see that that's actually spread the compound all the way around. So let's just put that back. And again, we're not trying to tighten this down with any great force, we're just like holding it together basically. So that's our sort of almost assembled hot end. So at this point I'm just going to put the piece of PTFE tube in that we got. So I'll just take that blue retaining clip out and then just push this piece of PTFE tubing in, and then reattach our retaining clip. So that basically will now stop that from coming out. So the next thing to do is to install our thermistor and our heater cartridge. So let me just get the camera in a better angle and I'll show you that. There we go. So while we're in this view, you can see better the assembled or partially assembled hot end. So the next thing we'll do is we'll install the heater cartridge. So we just take our cartridge, and you've got a couple of decisions basically where you want to line up the cartridge with everything else, but I'm just going to plonk it in here for now. So you want to try and get it so it's sort of roughly even on either side, and then you take the larger of the two Allen keys that you got given, and then all you want to do is basically just tighten this screw up, and what we're actually trying to do is slightly deform the heater block, and that will just clamp the cartridge in place. So you don't need to do it too much. It's literally just enough to clamp that cartridge in place, and basically when you can't move it, you know it's in. So that will now stay where we've put it. So now don't need the larger of the two Allen keys, and the next thing we need to install is the thermistor. So again, it just goes into that hole there, and what you're trying to do here is be even more gentle than we were with the heater cartridge, because you don't want to deform this the thermistor cartridge itself. So let me see if I can get that in a better angle for you. There we go. So basically this is loose in there at the moment. So with the smaller Allen key, we'll just tighten that up until we feel that we're up against the thermistor, and then it literally only wants a very small amount, and that's it. That's not going anywhere. That's now installed. I won't put the sock on because as we're going to be hot tightening, we're actually going to want to hold the block in place. So let me now get set up for showing you how to hot tighten the HotEnd, which is a required step before you can actually go ahead and use the HotEnd that we've assembled. Okay, so now we've assembled the HotEnd, the procedure we have to go through now is to do what's called hot tightening. Now we have to do that before we can use the HotEnd, and basically that just means that we heat up the HotEnd to around 280 to 185 degrees, and then we use there's a couple of different methods. So I'm going to use a 3D printed torque wrench, if you want to call it that, and this will provide enough torque for when we tighten the nozzle against the heat break inside the heater block. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the setup I've got going here. So if you watched the last video where I looked at the Duet 3, I've actually put a very basic setup onto the Duet 3, which allows me to then connect up a HotEnd and a thermistor and 24 volt power supply, just purely so I can turn on the heater and bring up the heater to temperature. So the procedure is to basically gradually bring up your HotEnd to temperature, let it sit for about 30 seconds to a minute at around 280 degrees. That just ensures that all of the metal is up to temperature. And then what we're going to do is basically hold the heater block and tighten the nozzle while it's warm. Okay, so what I've basically done there is probably speeded up the footage a bit and then brought you back just as I was tightening the HotEnd. So when you're using, I was using a big metal adjustable spanner to hold the block. What that will actually do is cause the block to lose a lot of temperature fairly quickly. So what I like to do is basically bring it back up to temperature again and let it sit, and then do another tighten. So that ensures that we've got the correct torque that we were meant to be getting. Now if you haven't got one of these little tools, I would either highly recommend you print one, and I'll put a link in the description to it, or if you follow the E3D installation guide for the V6, then they say to use a spanner, and then the amount of pressure that you can put on the nozzle with one finger is enough to tighten it up. So yeah, that's basically the procedure for hot tightening the HotEnd. I'm now going to let everything cool down, and then I'll go through the whole process again, just verbally, just to explain how I've done it, and then basically the HotEnd is then ready to use. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so there we are. That's the assembled and now hot tightened E3D V6. Really easy to do. I'll just briefly go through that process again. So once you've assembled your hot end in what they call a cold assembly, that's just basically screwing everything together, just doing things hand tight just to hold them together. The process is then to heat that hot end up to its maximum working temperature, which is about 285 degrees. And what that does is it allows all of the metal components to expand, and then we physically use a tool, either like this 3D printed one, or you can use an actual proper torque wrench to apply, I think it's 3 Newton meters of torque. And what that does is it basically pushes everything together in the hot end, so the nozzle will butt up against the heat break, and that's done to basically give the filament only one pass to go. Once that's done, obviously you let it cool down to complete, so it's safe to handle, and then it's ready to use basically. So it's the procedure you have to do every time you assemble a new hot end, and again when you change a nozzle or any component in the hot end. So you always have to hot tighten it. You can do it when it's assembled and attached to a printer. It's not as easy, I don't think, to really get in there and hold it and torque it down, but it's entirely possible. So yeah, that was just a quick video to show you the 2 E3D V6 hot ends that they sent me. They were sent to be put into my iDEX printer, which I'm building at the moment. So big thank you to them. I'll put a link in the description to E3D's website, a link to the hot end, and also a link to their official assembly guide. If you've got any questions, please put them down in the comments, and until next time, keep on making.